All right, so I haven't done a video for a while, um, and I want to do one now for the Nancy Guthrie. It's been 3 weeks since the abduction, um, and just kind of want to go over some things. I think I can't some new things that may have happened. I think I did a video pretty early on. I can't remember where it was, but I guess they have DNA. Now, whether they know if it's the person who did this or not, that hasn't. I think it hasn't been established. But they said that the person's DNA they have isn't in COVIS, which means that basically they can't track it. Which means they probably more likely haven't been arrested, um, and they can't, pinpoint who it is. Um, the family by the sheriff. The family has been cleared. FBI has not come out and said that the family's cleared. Um, I've been watching, lives of YouTubers that are there, and things have really calmed down as far as the media presence in front of the home. The sheriff's department has basically said that the YouTubers were a hindrance to the investigation and they needed to go home. And the sheriff said that they weren't doing anything. This is exactly what he said. They aren't doing anything but talking bad about the sheriff's department, which is him. Um, which I would be more concerned about him, you know, interfering with the investigation. I don't see how they were. They were out there just like any other reporter. I mean, people are going to talk bad about the sheriff's department no matter what, and probably even people that you like or you think you like are probably talking bad about the sheriff's department when you're not around. It's just the way it is, unfortunately. So, and then, yeah, I guess that it sounds like the FBI and sheriff's department is working together now. Um, Really, not a whole lot going on. There's been some arrests and some detainments. The last one, the person's Range Rover, which I thought I saw. I tried to go back to the footage. There was a Range Rover, like a silver colored Range Rover, I did see drive by earlier before the arrest was made. Now I don't know if it's the same one. I'll have to do some more digging because I don't know. It's either on two content, uh, creators' uh, lives. I went through JLRs. I couldn't find it, so it might have been on Dolly's. But I know it drove by really quick, and the windows seemed to be tinted, but you might have been able to see through the front windows. It could have been that person that was arrested, and we don't know if it's them or not. Um, we know that we got footage of somebody coming up to the front porch area there and messing with the camera. Um, and it seems to be somebody possibly Latino, medium complected, probably I would say anywhere from 20s to 30s, regular build, probably anywhere from 5'9" to maybe 5'11", probably anywhere from 180 to 200, 170 to maybe 200 poundish. No, they walk pretty normal. Like there wasn't anything, that identifiable by their gait, like if they were limping or they were pigeon toed or duck foot, whatever you want to call it. Um, they seem to kind of be leaning down a little bit, like they didn't want the person to. Well, I mean, you've probably seen the video by now. Um, and then they're saying they might have had a flashlight in their mouth. Now they're saying there might have been a ring underneath their gloves. They found some gloves, but it sounds like that it has nothing to do with the case. It could have even been like maybe one of police department LE's gloves. Um, I was looking, far as like how far away they were from like the Mexican border there in Tucson, Arizona, and it was just right under 9 hours. You know, they went down to Mexico, so I think they think that possibly, and I thought about this too. Like it could be somebody who is a legal alien that got into the states and then went back and maybe even took Nancy back. I don't think that they probably would want to travel too much with an elderly person. Um, this doesn't look good as far as every day it goes on, and I hate to say this if families watching or whatever, but every day this goes on with an 84-year-old you know elderly female that even walks with a cane, has a pacemaker. Those are what we know of. There's a lot of theories, like was it a burglary going wrong and then they took Nancy? Was it a kidnapping that went wrong and then they may have got rid of Nancy and then fled? Um, it sounds like to me, we don't even know if the ransom letters were legit. Even the first ones, there's quite a few, and it sounds like it might even be two or three different people that were sending the ransom letters. Um, so it doesn't sound like the family ever paid any of the ransom, you know, no, paid the ransom demands that we know of. So these people don't sound like they would have a whole lot of money to be traveling. They could be held up somewhere. It's just they got to figure out who it is, and I think they're just combing through everything. They have backpacks that they search through Walmart. They probably could go through and see every backpack that's been purchased and then kind of mark everybody off. If they have DNA, they could do the DNA genealogy, but they still have to identify the person, because what that does is it basically, if you do a DNA genealogy, it's like all the family. So you pretty much have to go through. If this guy had a lot of brothers and uncles and cousins around his age, well, uncles probably more likely won't be around his age, but cousins and brothers, then like you would have to go through all of them and 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 then kind of figure out who it was. But it does get you to it does take you down a path, and it does get you closer than especially than they are now. And it has been quiet. Quiet can mean good. Quiet can mean bad. Quiet can mean they're close. Quiet can mean they're not very far. Um, they haven't done a lot of searches, which makes me think, like, I guess they don't believe she's nearby, um, or they believe she's somewhere else that's not nearby for whatever reason. Um, which I don't know. That gets me. I like that's the part where I don't really understand. That's kind of like with Sebastian Rogers. Like, why haven't they done any searches? If they don't know where he's at. Which in that case, the 2-year anniversary of Sebastian Rogers is coming up here. Like the 26th, which is 5 days away, which is crazy to think how fast that one's went by. How fast this one's went by too. 3 weeks is a long time. There was a kidnapping. I was trying to think, like, I knew there. I was thinking of like the Michael Jordan's dad, but that wasn't really a kidnapping. I think they unalived him and then took his vehicle, and the two guys that did that got caught. And then I got thinking about like Patrick Duffy's parents, but they were shot and robbed. And then the girl on, I can't remember the show, something Sam, but she was unalived. I guess someone just come to her house and shot her. But the one I didn't know about, someone mentioned when somebody, creator's comments, was Cal Ripken Jr.'s mother. And I guess she was kidnapped for like 24 hours. And then they returned her. And I think there was no ransom ever paid, but they just returned her. And they still haven't figured out who did that. And I got to think about that. I was like, if Nancy, and trigger warning, if Nancy was alive, they could have just returned her somewhere and then got, and then left. Like, there would be no reason to unalive her unless, like, maybe she, I mean, unfortunately, she could have had a heart attack or something, and then like, oh boy, we can't do the ransom. We can't prove the proof of life. Um, and then maybe they tried to get the ransom anyways because they were that far in it. They're like, well, maybe, we could just, and then maybe they figured out real quick, maybe they did ask her some questions and like, they just like, well, if you can't show her pic, you don't want to show her photo or whatever, there's 3 questions, or here's 2 questions you could ask her, and we'll know who she is by how she answers it or not. And everybody has that probably, where like, if a loved one went missing, you could probably say, hey, there's like, or at least one, there's like one thing that we had. If you ask them this, they'll know what we're talking about, and I'll know the answer. And maybe they guessed, and they're like, and then they asked them again, and then they're like this, and then they ruled it out that like they don't have them. So now it's a manhunt, and that's what it seems to be. But I'm just speculating. I'm throwing some stuff out there. It's kind of right around my mind. Um, but I do pray and I do hope and I pray for the family that, somehow Nancy's okay and they figure out who did this and they're brought to justice. But I'm going to go ahead and end it there.